We're joined by our buddies, Basil Smikle, MS Now political analyst, former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party and professor of practice at Columbia University, and Susan Del Percio, MS Now political analyst and Republican strategist. Thank you both for coming to the weekend as always. I want to start with Texas. We have a lot to get to here, but there's I lived there for a long time. It's one of the things people are like, Eugene, we get it. Stop talking about you live in Texas. But I did. But I have always been a little like eye rolly at Democrats who've said they feel like they can win in Texas. But I spent some time down there with Tallarico recently, and just the reporting that we're seeing from folks, even this 80-year-old woman who's voted for Republicans since she was 18 years old, going to a Tallarico event, something does feel like it's happening, Susan. Or is it once again Lucy with the football?
It's a little Lucy with the football potentially, but never have we've seen such a horrible candidate running for U.S. Senate out of Texas. I mean, we've seen some other bad candidates and Republicans who have lost, thankfully, in other parts of the country. But when we're looking at Bill Paxton, he is just so fundamentally flawed. And he represents everything that people are frustrated with, including Republicans. So I would say maybe something is about to happen in Texas, but it will be because Democrats and independents are motivated and Republicans don't show up. I don't think Tallarico is going to win Republicans.
Flipping Republicans.
Yeah, that's not how he's going to get there. He's going to have to do what we saw Donald Trump do, frankly, especially in 2016, or find those voters who want to come out because they're just frustrated and they want to be angry at somebody.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, too. If you have Republicans who voted for Cornyn in the primary and they aren't into Paxton, or Republicans who are hardcore Trump supporters, but they're not so happy with all of the data centers that are popping up.
Or they're embarrassed, Elise. A lot of them are embarrassed to say anything about Bill Paxton, which is why he doesn't have, Ken Paxton, excuse me, which is why he doesn't have 2 cents in the bank right now.
They might be embarrassed to say it publicly, but I'm not sure that that necessarily translates to the ballot box. I mean, I talked with a Trump campaign staffer last week who said that they haven't even started spending money to, in earnest, define Tallarico, and that all of the, quote, crap with Paxton is baked in. Is that an argument that resonates with you, Basil?
Well, it is a Trump argument. And look, I did a campaign in Texas, back in 2002, Ron Kirk running against John Cornyn. That's the year Cornyn won. And I've been waiting for Texas ever since. But I tell you, it is interesting when you talk to voters down there, and I still talk to voters down there. There are really strong pockets of Democrats across the state. We've been talking about Beto O'Rourke for a long time, and now it's Tallarico. And one of the things that I like about Tallarico,
don't forget Wendy Davis.
And Wendy Davis, that's absolutely right. So there have been campaigns that have continued to push the envelope and energize Democrats. And the thing that I like about Tallarico is that he's talking about faith in ways that Democrats hadn't previously, but he's finding ways to deploy that in the electorate. I like the way that he's talking about affordability, but he's also talking about corruption. And when you add the data center conversation on top of that, one of the things he's trying to say is that there is a coterie of individuals and companies that support this president that don't support you. That there are a lot of ways in which the president is trying to make his friends and supporters wealthier, but not you. Mm-hmm. And when you think about inflation and tariffs and the small businesses that are being impacted by that, the average person in Texas and across the country they're really struggling. Texas is just sort of a laboratory of sorts. And even if Tallarico doesn't win, I think he can, but even if he doesn't, I definitely think it's a pathway forward.
But are Republicans being caught flat-footed by the data center buildup in so many of these purple, red states even across the country where there are really contested races and you have data centers that are coming up that the public isn't that happy about?
Across the board, Democrats, Republicans,
yes, exactly. It's the perfect. One strategist called it a horseshoe issue because it is angering both sides of the aisle.
Well, it's interesting, and we've talked about polling before, and one of the things that's been evident in these polls are these sort of late breakers, like folks deciding really late. And one of the things that I think contributes to that is both the president and the administration not being honest and open about what data centers do. It's all the drill, right? But it's also how erratic this president is.
Right.
The fact that day to day a voter can wake up and say, what the hell did he do today? What's happening now? So the flat-footedness, I think, is on the issues, yes, of data centers and the economy and affordability, but it's also the fact that there is no consistency with this administration, and that every single day a voter can wake up in the morning and be like, damage report. Right.
But there's also a few other things. One, I like to think of the data centers a little bit of fracking. If you remember what an issue fracking was, that is, and again, not enough time has gone by to see what the actual environmental harm is and other issues, how it affects folks. But also, when it comes to these data centers, especially in a place like Texas, what does it affect? Water.
Right.
Yeah.
And water is, I think, the most political issue, even though we don't talk about it a lot. Mm-hmm. It is something that drives communities and drives turnout and is a Republican, independent, and Democratic issue. So homes, and we're going to see more and more of that, especially in the Southeast.
Yeah, we have
Southwest.
We have Doug Jones coming on. He's very big on the data center, so we're going to keep having the conversation. Basil, your party's having their little summer meeting, little family meeting.
I love those meetings.
This new DNC calendar. Let's throw this up, Renee, for folks. E2. South Carolina will be January 22nd. Nevada will be February 1st. New Hampshire, February 8th, New Mexico, February 15th, Michigan, February 22nd, and Virginia, February 29th. Everyone I've talked to at the DNC at all levels, and Democrats in general, people that will be voting on this later on, I think today, or at least this weekend, say that this is kind of a done deal. Mm-hmm. When you look at that calendar, what is the kind of candidate you think comes out? You don't have to name a person, feel free to. But what is the kind of person who's able to pull together all of the different groups of Democrats in each of those six states?
First and foremost, South Carolina, African-American voters, you want to excite the base of the party. That's where you need to really show up and show out.
If you can't make it past South Carolina, you might as well go home.
I mean, then you've got to really explain why you're not tapping into that constituency. Nevada, a lot of Latino voters, but also union voters, right? So this is the first two states are really the basis of the Democratic Party and the Democratic coalition going forward. And then obviously the other states as we go out, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Missouri? Michigan, Virginia. I need my glasses on. Michigan and Virginia. And obviously the Michigan race, very, very recently, really great test case for, again, union engagement, but also messaging. And, El Sayed in winning that primary for DSA and progressive voters is really important. But I would add this other layer to it. What we've been seeing may be some questions about whether or not the progressives and moderates can win. I don't know that that's the right question.
Right.
I think it's almost a false choice. You kind of need both. What we are seeing is Democratic engagement in ways that we hadn't seen in quite a few years, and that's really important. And so I think one of the things that should come out of this meeting is how do we expand that? How do we continue to get Democrats to overperform across the state, especially where the congressional races you have African Americans running in redistricted areas? You really need overperformance to keep those Democrats in power.
But like as a practitioner, I'm also looking at that calendar, and I see that the Democrats are not necessarily looking just to go ultra progressive. That's the important part, because when you choose, it is a wide swath. But by having South Carolina, and Basil and I talk about this all the time, when you're looking at African American voters, you're not looking at progressives necessarily. Right. And the same thing can be said for union or Hispanic voters in Nevada. So I think it's actually a really wise calendar for Democrats, because they're not leading off on the more progressive side, which Republicans, I guarantee, will try and take advantage of.
Just quickly on that point, it's a very important point, because just north of that, in North Carolina, you have Roy Cooper running, who's actually doing very well in the suburbs and with independent voters. So again, really important test cases for the rest of the country.
That's a really interesting point, Susan.
I tried. That's why I'm here, I think.
Basil Smikle, Susan Del Percio, thank you so much for joining us this morning.